My name is Dr. Seyi Odeyale from the Department of Architecture, University of Ibadan in Nigeria. I'm to present a topic on health, equity, and urban degradation, misuse, and manifestations in the city of Ibadan in Nigeria. It's a part of a course we are offering with the University of the US, and wanted to showcase some of the things we've been doing in terms of urban development in relation to the health of the city and the development that takes place, this transformation within it, both positive and untowardly negative. Part of the things we want to talk about is the worth of an health to the individual and also to the city. We need to talk about the importance of health, not only individual health, even the environmental health and the role it plays in the well-being of human beings. So we have looked at that and initially want to emphasize that more in this study. And they want to also emphasize the need for good quality of life, which is an essential aspect of sustainable environment. And that will take me to explain some of the concepts that we have in this discussion. So we have the health of the city, we have equity, we have urban degradation. And in many instances, urban centers are where we have large number of people living in them. So in our part of the world, in Africa, we have many of our towns and cities that attract people from the rural area. And we call it the pull factor. We have, and education institutions located in the cities, in the urban centers. People from the rural area want to move to the urban center to enjoy that privilege of education. They have employment, we have good infrastructure, social amenities available in the city. And so people who wants to leave the rural area to come to the city. And one of the cities that we have in Africa, in fact, has been well documented that Ibadan is one of the largest cities in this West Africa zone. So we have City of Ibadan, which in the modern times, in the post-independent era of Nigeria, is the capital of the old western states of Nigeria. And at the moment, it's the capital of Oyo State. So you can see the map of Nigeria. We have what we call the 6 geopolitical zones. We have the North Central region or the zone, Northeast zone, Northwest region, Southeast region or zone, then South region, and then Southwest region. You can see that we use some color to differentiate them. The kind of greenish color is where we have what we call the Southwest, which is the old Western states, part of the major part of the old Western state of Nigeria, that we have Ibadan as the capital of it. So you can see that it has about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 states that made up the Southwest zone. And then Oyo State happens to be one of the largest states in the Southwest, and Ibadan is the capital. And in Ibadan, we have so many things that makes it very unique. It's the cultural center, it's the heartland of Yoruba land, it is the heartbeat of Yoruba land. It has a lot of heritage buildings and facilities and sites that make it very unique. And we have large number of people from the rural area move from the villages and towns to Ibadan because of its attraction, what I mentioned before as the pull factor. So and one of the things that we have there is because the capital city of Old Western State, before Nigeria independence in 1960, is situated in Ibadan. The House of Assembly, the government arm, the courts, education institution, even the University of Ibadan, before the Nigerian independence in 1948, was founded at Ibadan. So we have many things that is speaking or is going for the city of Ibadan. So that makes it very attractive for people to come and live there. So you can see, if you move to the next slide, you see that we have, some of the buildings that we have there, they've been more than 70 years old, some are 80 years old, some are going to 100, that are built before Nigeria's independence, and they are still being used now. So we have them, and we have life there. We have what we call the city life being seen in those places. We have the rustic, roof. We have the densely populated area of the Ibadan area called the core area, that people lives in. That we have some what we call the zona area, of the places. So all this points to the fact of the quality of life that we're talking about. And one of the things that we can actually refer to as a point at the quality of life is the access to good life, access to water, access to quality building, a good environment, green area, nice network environment, green belts, garden-like environment, and good quality, infrastructure for the people. So that we can count as part of what we can look for, in the city. And most of these cities in Africa, boast of large population, but the corresponding social infrastructure is lacking. Physical infrastructure is not very good either. So access to water is zero. Many a times we have to, dig well. We have to look for water here and there. So that calls for, a lot of consideration. You can see in that map that we just seen the location of Ibadan. Inside the map of Nigeria, you can see, that is located at the very heart of the land, towards the center of the whole of Oyo State, and it has a lot of connection to the other part of Nigeria. From here to Lagos, it has connected to Lagos, which is the former federal capital of Nigeria, connected to Abeokuta, connected to South Side region where we have the oil-rich states, Benin City, and it has this connection. And then Ibadan boasts of many markets, physical markets where people come here to trade. People come from the interland, from the farmland, and that bring their goods there to sell. So we have a lot of road networks there that points to the infrastructural development of the state. But many of them need some upgrading. So that's what we want to actually look at, those factors that impact on the development of this city, and how best we can harvest, how best we can, make use of the facilities available and make them more sustainable for the teeming population that we have there. And if you look at Nigeria, people under 24 are more than 70% in our population, our census. So we have teeming youth under 30, thereabouts, both male and female. They are more than 70% of the population. That calls for a lot of action. So we can see the sea of houses in the what we call the traditional urban core of Ibadan. You can look at the Mapo, that's what we call the Mapo Hall. And then when you overlook the city, you will see a lot of buildings there, very densely populated, packed together because of the expense. The land is expensive there, and most of them are what we call the old quarters of family quarters that people lay hold to, who don't want to give up, they don't even want to sell them. And the buildings that are there, they have a kind of fond memories for those buildings. They don't want the buildings to be pulled down. And many of those buildings don't have modern facilities. They lack toilets, they lack kitchen, they are cooking outside the building. They are used to such things. So we need to do a lot of efforts to bring them to modern requirements. So these are part of things that we want to quickly look at, and how best we can approach revamping this environment for the use of all. So, and people in the developed world, many a time have not seen this kind of things before. But that's part of things that we have to live with in this part of the world, and how best can we address these changes. So if you talk about health, if you talk about well-being, what do we mean? So there's always a strong connection between housing and health. So if you want to be healthy, you have to also take care of your housing condition. Your housing condition is in good state, you can be sure that your health is protected. So a clean and beautiful environment is largely therapeutic. If your environment is clean, we all know that, if it is beautiful, if it is aesthetically balanced, then we can, have a direct connection to a well-being. I mean, a well-suited life. So, unkept environments, smelly environments, ugly environments are a recipe for short life, for early death. So, a disease and backward housing is not only structurally dangerous, but can also impose emotional, psychological, and psychiatric trauma on the occupants. So, we all know these are facts that are out there that it makes the consideration of a well-balanced, sustainable environment needful in this part of the world. But what we discover is that even in this 21st century, we are still struggling to make the environment as beautiful as need be. We still have a lot of setbacks in that manner. And part of the things that we have to look at is the characteristics of urbanization that happens in developed or developing countries. If you consider European countries, we have urbanization that has been recorded for over 100 years, and many of them are based on industrialization. People have in those parts of the world, in Western world, in London, in Birmingham, in Manchester, Paris, New York, Michigan. Talk about all these important cities of the Western world. Part of the urbanization or development of the city is founded on rapid industrialization of 1870, the 19th century, 20th century. That is well founded. But what we discover is that in our own part of the world, we have urbanization without industrialization. We don't have industries, yes, we have an urbanization. So many of our cities are exploding, with a population overflow, leading to slum, leading to unkept environment, leading to exacerbated infrastructure. When you have overlaid the infrastructure kept, the infrastructure starts to collapse, the lack of drainage. So for the past 20 years, even 50 years, we have seen rapid development in our own part of the world, which is something that calls for more interrogation and more investigation. The factors that led to our urbanization is different to what we can account for in the developed world. If you look at Britain, you look at Europe as a whole, look at Japan, what led to the rapid urbanization is founded on structured factors, industrialization, education, production, and things like that. But in our part of the world, we see that people are migrating. The pull factor is making them to come to the cities or the urban centers because of the things that are promised, maybe by the politician, because they're in search of good life. The rural area cannot contain them, and they have aspiration for better life. So most of them move to the urban center. And when they move to the urban center, they move to the shanty area. They move to where we call the slum. So we have that in that place. So we have these graph that explain that what we call the migration phenomenon. We have people moving from rural area, and moving straight to the city center. And they want to, because in the center you have the appeal for work. You have people coming there to do their daily chores. And the second stage they move to what we call the urban fringes around the city, around the urban core, and then lead to the development of ad hoc settlements, informal settlements. Outskirts, inexpensive buildings, affordable land. They move there, and before you know it, it progresses to the fringes and what we call the continuous expansion of the city to the peripheral zones. So we have that experience in our part of the world. So the very low income people, they move, and then the low income people, they consolidate, and before you know it, they kind of meander their way to settle permanently in the not so desirable old quarters, old provinces or prisons that were called the traditional core. That's what we experience in Ibadan, for instance. And then we are going to look at that the more. So what are the characteristics of these cities for urban center that we are describing? So we have what we call physical or visible defects. If you look at the next slide, it shows a development. At the same time, we have what we call physical defects or visible defects that can point to exacerbation of the urban center infrastructure. We can see congestion of traffic. We can see defective mass transportation system. We can see conflict and land use. We can see obsolete buildings, here and there, and that calls for concern, and that leads to what we call environmental degradation, substandard infrastructure, and services. So we have example of places that we see that we have to find a way to revamp, and that calls for serious infrastructural revitalization, and we have to look at example of another part of West Africa, for instance in Accra. We are seeing a place called Sodom and Gomorrah. It shows a very shanty, people living in a very deplorable condition. In the morning, they wake up to face some of these dirty environments that is less desirable for human beings to live in. So, and many times it leads to what we call sick building syndrome. If you look at the next slide, it talks about when they are living in a very shanty, unkept condition, on nice places. So the building itself imposes on the individual or the occupants a kind of a sickness that can be referred to as SBS, sick building syndrome. We have pollution, air pollution. Next slide. You can see that there. We see things like allergy. We see exacerbation of irritation in the skin, on the skin. We see odors. We see a kind of biological defect in terms of rats, rodents spreading some dysentery or disease of the waterborne diseases, airborne diseases on the rampage, which is kind of linked to the buildings in the sense that the environment is unkept, it's not clean, it's not very, very nice, and little changes will have brought a good health solution to the people. Just take away the slum, take away the bad water, take away the bad drainage, and provide a good road network, and part of the building will have been resolved. So there's a kind of direct link between urban degradation and bad health, or some sicknesses that has been established, like air pollution, which can lead to bad particles being inhaled, volatile organic compounds, bacteria, parasite, chemicals, if care is not taken. And then lead to water pollution, can lead to dysentery, can lead to cardiovascular illnesses, can lead to respiratory illnesses. It can even contaminate the soil on the long run if it's not well treated. And it can lead to skin irritation, it can lead to gastrointestinal problem, even cancer. Risk of cancer can come up. These are things that are linked to bad housing and unkept environment that we need to actually encourage some of our urban centers in Africa to address these issues and think about the health situation of the people living there. If you draw a kind of contrast between those traditional core areas and what we call the GRAs, GRA, government reserve area. During the time of the pre-independence, the colonial masters, they dwell in some secluded area, separate. They now label the place GRA, government reserve areas, that are meant for the colonial masters and their elites to live there. So after the colonization period, they turned them to housing estates for the elite alone. So that has been the problem that we are seeing. And that place have a better housing compared to the former places that we are referring to. So in the traditional urban core area, we see some of this manifestation of some of these things in a building, damp homes, which is fertile space for mold to grow on walls, on carpet, on furniture, on clothing, eye problems, things, like ensuring cross ventilation of the building. So we discovered some of these buildings that we had in those old quarters, they don't have cross ventilations. So those they don't have proper air coming in, and that is leading to more bad condition for people living there. So another thing that we noticed for the urban centers that we mentioned in Africa is this, apart from the urban degradation, the physical defects that we can point to, the sick buildings, the not well articulated buildings that we see around an environment, lack of drainage, lack of proper road network. Another indicator that we can point to is poor economic performance in those places. We have high rates of employment, we have underemployment, we have low income by the people working wares on the road just to have a living, just to be able to make up what you call it, to improve their living condition. They have to take to about the street. So there must be a way that the government, the policymakers, and the non-governmental organizations can come in to help with these things. Next slide, you can see it points to some of these factors that we can refer to in Africa. The urban rates, the urban poverty, is increasing in Kampala, for instance, that's in Uganda, in Lagos, for instance, in Ibadan, it's linked close to Lagos. So we have urban poor concentrated in the informal settlements. So we can see the growth rate is high, in some of these what we call overtime years, like 65 to the 1980s, 1980 to 1998, or then post-millennia, 2025, 2024, we see people moving more to this urban system. In spite that we have even less housing there available, people are still moving in, leading to congestion, leading to mostly development of slum. And we have to now think of how do we best help them. If we can't clear the slum, and we need to go for upgrading, that leads to the next slide. How do we help them? It's not easy to provide housing for them totally. So the environment has been misused. There are some manifestations of this misuse of environment, leading to sick building, leading to bad, defective environment, leading to bad road network or even non-existing road network. What do we do? So there are classical way of dealing with it, going for what we call slum clearance, where the government just move in and demolish all the shanties and reclaim the land and send the people packing without even thinking about them. Another way is to think of ways to remove the debt and the negative factors from the slum and kind of upgrade it to make it a bit better for human life. That's one of the arrow points of this study, to be able to see how best we can help. If we can't help on a scale of 10, maybe on a scale of 5, we can help them. If we can't go the whole on, at least gradually we can impact on their way of life. This is one of the next slide show some of the poorly condition of some of these buildings that we see around. Because of poverty, the foundation is giving way. What do we do, to help with this thing? So next slide. Slums are the physical manifestation of failed housing and urban development policies. So whereas rapid urbanization in the developed world was fueled by the agricultural and industrial revolution, in the developed nation is the result of failure of rural economy. If the rural economy or rural life has been made very inviting, that will have, prevent some of the development of some of these slums. But because the rural economies, the rural area are not well taken care of, we are seeing many people fleeing the rural area and then coming to the urban centers or cities and increasing the problem of slum and informal settlements, which is not very, very helpful to the overall economy of the country and the well-being of people that are found in those parts of the city that we are referring to. So we need to really talk about this. Next slide explains some of these factors, dynamics of the urban slum problem. So I can see, if you look at the past century, if you can trace it back a bit to about some 200 years ago to about 1800, you can see the world population is less than 1 billion. And then in 1850, gradually moving up to even now, 2024, project 2050. So we are moving to about 9 billion in the world. And the rural-urban dichotomy is seen there, that the critical factor is the urban slum, which you can see that is in the region of the B zone, the A zone, the B zone, and the C zone. So we have seen about 100 million people are clogged or captured in the urban dichotomy. They are captured in that the 2000 upward. About 100 million people are found in the slum. That's a sizable number of population, across the world that needs some attention. So the world population is rising, and they are contributing more to it. People in the slum, people moving from the rural, what we call the rural-urban drifts, contributed mainly or fuel this lopsided distribution towards the city. So what are the solutions that we need to prefer? We need to pay more attention to slum upgrading, pay more attention to urban development. We need to pay more attention to what we call regional development, that both macro and at the micro level. So that is what we are talking about here. So we cannot solve all problems with the same mindset that created it. So we are moving to the next slide. So we need to recognize the basic right of the slum dwellers as urban citizens, provided with security, think about their rights. At the same time, we must find a way to make their living condition better. We have to think about improving their life, taking them away from temporary settlements, and giving them a more permanent structure to live in. And so we can see some of the what we call the MDG goals, the Millennium Development Goal. The next slide speak about that. The Millennium Development Goal. The next slide, explain that Goal 7 targeted improve the life of over 100 million slum dwellers. So part of the goals that we want to achieve. So, and that makes us to unpack them more. What do we mean by slum? The next slide, you can see what they call favela in the Latin American countries, in Brazil, in Venezuela, in all those places. They kind of target favelas. In one part of the world, we have signed that they are made of maybe cardboard, the homes, and there are human beings that are living there. So we find some of those characteristics also in Ibadan. When we have people living in shanties, in not very good condition. So, and in the UN Habitat definition, when many a times slums are crowded areas of the city where housing and living conditions are terrible. The next slide kind of explains some of those dimensions of slum life. Access to water is horrible. Access to sanitation is negligible, and the location of the house is questionable, and there's no sufficient living area for the people to live in. So the UN Habitat expert group meeting, kind of flag these things up that we need to actually work on. If you can improve the access to water, the life in the slum area or the informal settlement area will definitely be impacted positively. If you can, increase their awareness of good sanitation, to help them. If you can, ensure what we call secure tenure, it will definitely lead to a better life. Durability of housing will help as well. So, and in the slum, we discovered that many of them don't need much. They are usually used to living, in a very compact zone, so they just need the help in some places. Part of in India, Asia, in Africa, and our cities are growing very fast. In fact, there's a projection that Nigeria might be the second or third largest country in the world after China and India by the year 2050. So, and it's because of the contributing factor of the cities that we're talking about. The cities are growing very fast in Africa, and especially in sub-Saharan Africa, 90% of population growth in developing world or countries in Africa are located in a city, and most of them live under $2 per day. that's very, very meager. They live less than $2 per day. So they need help. So 1/3 of people in developing countries live in cities, live in slum or quarter settlements. That's another projection that, in a serious case, about 30% of the population in some of these cities in Africa they live in a slum-like condition and they need some attention. And you can see some of the things that they're involved in. Look at that, you can go to the next slide, and then we can see, and the next one after it, and many of them, they have to build their houses from the scrap, from, putting disused material together, bottles, plastics, cardboards, aluminum roofing sheets, to be able to, make as their building material. But that's what they can afford. And they have to live from trash to mouth. And they have to turn scraps into, their building materials, to be able to find a place to live, which is a really serious problem. That's cause for the manifestation of some of these urban degradation. You can see that picture more in the informal settlements and slums of these places. So, and sometimes they live in bad condition. They also work in a very bad condition. The next slide explains that. They work in bad condition and who live. They live in bad condition, and even where they go to work too is less desirable. Many of them work on the streets where they live. They work as street vendors, selling food or crafts. They work in low-paid jobs like shoe cobblers, drivers, housekeepers, or construction sites, to build the cities. So they are the hard workers of the city, and the city needs to give back to them as well. So that's one of the things we want to encourage. How do we give back to them? How do we help them? The next slide explains some of the works they do. How they build the houses. They build with corporations. They help themselves in putting some of their houses together. So next slide explains that how do they help themselves and what we can do to help them as well. The people in the slum area and informal settlements of this world, many a times they are very creative. They can use throwaway materials, like tires of a vehicle, like bottles that people have dropped away, like unused roofing sheets. They are very creative kind of. So we can learn from them even, to kind of turn waste to wealth. So they build their own homes, they save and borrow from each other, they create their own network to help each other. So how can we help them? We can protect them from being thrown out of those places. Because when what we call gentrification, when these people that have money comes, they can, ask for slum clearance. The elite can come with the policies of the government to just clear the place, throw away and reclaim the land for themselves and turn it to plots and sell it for millions of naira or millions of dollars for their own pockets. So we can help them with tools and create to improve their housing. We can give them some soft loans. We can teach them to succeed. We can train them in better jobs. In small IT, small tailoring, shoemaking, repair of mobile phones. These are things that the government or the NGOs can be involved in to improve the life. And if we improve their life, it will have a trickle-down effect. So what is upgrading? Upgrading is moving some of these things that we have seen. If you look at the picture that we are presenting there, you can see the top and the bottom. It's the same place, but with little improvements, little repainting, bringing in some flowers, removing the gutter or covering them up with the channelizing the drainage, making them more beautiful, decent, will improve the way of life. Improve the place. Instead of it being run down, we can as well turn it to something useful and more creative. That's what we have there. So upgrading means working with the community to improve their living condition by providing electricity, water, trash collection, schools, clinic, bridge and road and pathway. We can learn from these successful programs that we see in some places in Brazil. We in the part of this work can learn from them. We can look at the next slide, that explains it better. We can improve their living condition, we can provide assistance to them, we can go into solar a panel. We can give them small panel and small inverter, to harvest and bring in, instead of linking them to expensive electricity from the electricity board that they cannot afford. We can upgrade their life and give them better access to health, education, clean water, safe neighborhood, and better living condition and working condition. Since that is the meaning of upgrading, it's not a very big thing. Even little increments can lead to very big results. When we touch some of the components of the small slum life or the formal lives, and we kind of improve on it, can actually mean a lot to the dwellers there. So one example is given in the next slide of how it looks like before and after in some favela in Brazil, in Guaranga in Brazil. Before it looks terrible, after it looks that way. Before it looks this way, after it top and bottom. Before at the top, you can see how it looks. After some little work, environmental improvements, it brings, the place to look better. Though we cannot 100% change it, but at the same time, we can clear away the dirt, burn them off, and then create proper channel for water to move, and then you find a better condition of living for the people. And another example is given in the next slide of before and after condition of places that are touched by the development, by simple reconditioning, what we call upgrading, and channeling of the stream, and remove them from flow area, by making the water condition at the river of the stream be properly placed in the proper drainage for the water to flow, and then leaving the building are more safer and cleaner and improved living condition. So you can see example like that in these places. And next slide also provide the kind of intervention measures that we can look at. We can, as part of policy development, you can talk about the use of the land, services, and development can bring about that. So next slide explain the issue of extended infrastructure, and when we start to plan, over time, it can lead to a better system for water, better system for the drainage, for treatment of the solid waste and disposal system in some of these cities. So we can also upgrade the housing condition, to help. The next slide talk about, turning some of the depressed environments in, to a livable housing condition, bringing what we call housing maintenance as well, adjusting the building and plan regulation to allow the slum area to breathe, not forcing them to comply with what the elites are complying with, because they cannot measure up to the condition of the elites. So we have to think of how best they can, bring them up. And next slide also explain vital issue of transportation condition. We can maintain and improve the existing transport network and services around the city, and with overflow into the informal settlement sector, and that will help to increase the flow of people, will lead to more production, the movement of production, food production, and also network of people to be able to flow from one end to another. And that has a kind of overflow effect or surplus effect on the populace. So some of the approaches as urban developers, as architects, as builders, that we can do, or we can, work on, is presented in the next slide. We have what we call executive control. When we talk about planning, coordination, improvement of standard, bringing in technology, organization, human resources development, financial control. So we can bring in some of these, tested approaches to help with development of this place. So we kind of use some of these things as a kind of suggestion in Ibadan. For instance, at the local areas, we kind of suggest some of these things to the policymakers here in our part of the world, which I believe over time will be done. So if you want to also improve on that part of the Africa, some of these tested case studies or approaches can be used. Planning, coordination, gathering information, use of technology, building codes, then design and construction, bringing in affordability and generating employment in that process of providing good housing for them. So that helps a lot. And the next slide explains that by using step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, data collection, field survey, data review, synthesis, identification of development options, step 3, data design and implementation, monitoring and evaluation. So these are steps that can be used, to understand some of these places, this slum, these villages, these fringe development, informal settlements, and find a way to document them, and find a way to suggest changes that will lead to better life and well-being for the inhabitants. So we can further break this, steps down into phases. You can see the next slide. Phase 1 talks about identification of existing situation. So we have to first of all document how they are, how this situation there physically appear now, the defects that we have there, the poor housing condition, the various use of material that's not effective. Then we formulate in phase 2 alternative town structure, city development. What can we do? Bringing in some more sustainable, material, master plan, and the preparation, what we call EIA, environmental impact assessment of the place, and then detailed local plans for immediate implementation, then monitoring and evaluation. So these are things that we can do. So under each of these phases, we have the division in the next slides. So we have, what do you do when you want to identify existing situation? You have to think about the survey. You have to think about the land use program. You have to talk about the vegetation, the soil type, what area and field photography has to come in. You have to do what we call population sensors. If that has been done, you can go into, there can be secondary data that you can use. The housing condition, you have to look at it, make some sample survey of that. You have to look at the cultural fabric of the people. Are they indigenous people? What is their language? What's their family structure? We have to interview them and put them on the computer. Look at their migration origin, what we call it, historical origin of the people, where they come from. If you know their origin, you can now think of how to help them more. The economic structure, markets that they have, public infrastructure or attitude to infrastructure, public utilities. These are kind of things that made up the factor, the phase 1 of the existing situation. So, and we can also use modern methods to get the information. We can use urban processes of GIS, land use planning, land use zoning. This comes in under this GIS modern tool to help be able to document some of this information. So the next slide will explain that. We have the survey, we have the GIS data, we have that documents the land ownership, the transportation, existing one, the boundaries, and all that comes in to form part of the data that can be analyzed further to propose solution to the problems that we see in the informal sector, in the slum area, or what we call the traditional urban core of some of these cities, for instance, in Ibadan, that we identify. So next slide explain how those things come together. Looking at the survey, the mapping, the registry, the land management, and these are the information available today that we can, tap into to get some of these things together. So we have the model there in the next slide that we can use to map some of these things, the contribution from various environmental leaders that comes with the planning, the irrigation, with the socio-cultural issues or crime issues. The police will bring those information. You can get information from the police, the crime inventory, then the safety aspect too, the fire issue, safety in the environment as we're trying to recondition the place. Those information are already there that we can tap into and use them as a kind of a baseline to plan for the new alternative plan town or arrangement for these favelas, for these slums that were found in these urban centers, just to improve their life, just to mitigate some of these problems that we can see that's emanating. The sewer condition can improve and all that we see. So nowadays we have this information. For instance, in Malaysia, they have it documented that you can go to the web and get. So these are kind of things that we need to go. The next slide explain that. We can also imbibe that in our own part of the world, in Africa. We can make some of these things. Even the use of AI now is coming in. Artificial intelligence in prompting some of the solutions to some of these problems that we see around us. So, and that also, as we are trying to manage that, goes into many aspects of urban revitalization. Next slide explain that. That has to do with transportation, that has to do with land use planning, transport planning, which are majorly absent from the slum, but we need to bring them in, tie them to what's in those places. So, and then in the other slide that comes in, next slide, talks about the processing of some of this information, that we can learn from. A comprehensive environment for spatial analysis. So we can learn from some of this sequencing. So the urban planners, as students that's learning some of these tools, is going to actually impact some of these cities and slum development. We need to arm ourselves with some of these tools. They are out there, GIS is there, all these tools are meant for us to properly grab the sequence of situation and how best to maneuver. And then before we start designing physical, building, so we can first of all go global, look at it from the satellite imagery, and then we can now from there move into the physical layers. On ground, we need to effectively profile a sustainable solution. So spatial analysis is another tool that can be used, as we are seeing here. So next one, emphasize the importance of the GIS, the graphical information system information, the what we call BIM, build information modeling, kind of tied the progress we've made in information technology for the use of the city in planning the city of the future and the city of today and improving the life of the inhabitants therein. So the phase 2 talk about formulation of alternative town structure. Next slide explain that. We are trying to look at the methodology that we can use for this urban renewal, urban upgrading. In the next slide, talk about the phase 2, now the formulation of alternative town structures. We have urban land requirements, land use allocation. So these are things that are already existing in some other part of the world that developing what can imbibe so that it can structure, the land available, and we can, kind of turn it away from the slum-like look that we have now and the slum-like manifestation we have now to something better. It's still that we can be proud of for the 21st century. So we have to kind of look at alternatives, town structure, in terms of road network, in terms of transportation network, in terms of land use, in terms of regional development. These are things that we have to talk about. And we have some examples of case studies around the world that we can, refer to. Next slide explain that. For instance, some work done by Peter Rogers Partnership in London, in some towns and villages of London. We can pick some, information from there, and we can look at how they arrange their cities, and we can bring those information to bear a new town development in Africa and some other part of the world that needs developed part of the world like Latin America. We can borrow some ideas from there that have been proven and used, juxtaposing of the core area with the economic zone with the residential area, and then we can balance it up with the interfacing road network. That's what we can see from that example of the case study there. And another one, the third one, next slide, talks about the master plan design. making the preparation, having what we call EIA or ESIA, environmental and social impact assessment. So of the area, presenting a kind of alternatives, and then seeking the government approval or the local government approval or the people's approval for participatory design. Kind of engaging them in it, making them to have some input in design, and then providing a kind of better arrangements for the city and for the peripheria of the city, as the case may be. Example is shown there too, in the way they handle some of these things. The next slide, in London, a kind of where the villages around London, local area around there, how they're able to handle it and transform it and link it up with the greater London environment. It's a kind of things that we can do also in the developing world. We can learn from there. We can find a way to team up our area with the urban centers, so that people can be encouraged to live in the right area instead of moving en masse to the city, thereby leading to slum and all that. So you can find a way to treat and kind of find a synergy between the rural and the urban, and we can thereby revitalize the environment and distribute the population across the cities and across the rural area, so that the two can communicate. The rural and the urban can communicate, and we can have a good life for the inhabitants. Number 4 talks about detailed local plans for immediate implementation. In the next slide talks about the macro design, which is neighborhood design, layout of the residential area, talking about the road usage, design of the road, the sewage area, the water supply, the drainage, the detailed design of the landscape, having what we call the buffer zone, the play area for the children, not just putting up the place for residential alone, thinking about other things that inform development of the city. So we can see example like that in that case study that we have next there, provided by the study that was done in a project in Silvertown project, in neighborhood of London. It was done the kind of a very beautiful design. These are things that you can learn from. We're not going to do exactly what they've done in our part of the world, developing world, but we can learn some good lessons from there, and we can do some extrapolation, to develop our part of the world. So the next slide shows some of the development they are doing there in those places. So, and then we can learn from the best parts around the world, which is important. And also we can learn from what we call the experts or the gurus. We can learn from those places, like all these great architects of the past they've done some work, and they propose some models of development. Next slide explains some of this, what we call the prominent architects, that we can learn from, that helps in the development of the city. For instance, when we want to develop Abuja, that's the new federal capital territory of Nigeria, Kezotang, a Japanese architect and urban designer, was called upon to help in developing that. We can also, learn from all these good, successful projects across the world. Development of Brasilia, in Brazil, the new town from Rio de Janeiro to Brasilia, we can learn from there. And then we can think of how we can implement some of those, solution in a smaller version in our part of the world. So we have these, examples that can lead to what we call urban regeneration of the environment. So we see some part of it being done by Albert Speer in Shanghai development after the Second World War. He was called upon, and he did a good job in some of these places. So we can call upon those principles. I was privileged to attend some conference in the past, and then I got across some of these principles, or some of that was done by these Polish architects, Polish urban designer, on how to revitalize the urban core of African cities. They give an example of Accra in Ghana. Some of the examples used there in designing some of this environment in Tema in Accra, part of Ghana, that is run down. So he kind of proposed a principle he mentioned that if you can think of a free flow of traffic in the environment, that by and large, you will solve a lot of problems in the informal settlement arrangement of the city. So if you can properly plan the trunk A road, trunk B road, trunk C road, and then you can link them up properly and to serve the various inhabitant needs, if that is properly done, then other things will fall in line. So you have to think about the streets, think about the roads, think about the railway, the tramway if need be, and then the pathway and walkway. That form like an artery, and it means that the city can breathe. Like we have these characteristics of the city, the movement in the city, the respiration of the city, the stability of the city, the expansion of the city, the growth of the city. Very, very important. The reproducibility of the city, being able to reproduce itself, and being a living entity, kind of, so that instead of the city dying in form of a slum, it will be brought back to life. It will be transformed back to life. So that kind of things that the principal encourage. And then we can move from the one end of the slum to the other end of the modern development. The skyscraper, the next slide showcase that, and then we can think about that. As we develop the city, in one hand with the slum development, we also think about the other end of the city development that has to talk about the high end markets, development of the skyscraper, office apartments, eyebrow area, for the rich. So take care of the slum. We need to also think about them. So urban designers, architects, builders, we need that good things do not happen by accident. They are always planned for. The Dubai of this world, the Abu Dhabis of this world are planned for. So our own part of the world in Africa, we need to make some plan next 50 years, next 100 years, next 30 years. How do we want our environment to look like? And then consciously plan for it. Presently the African Union has what we call Agenda 2063. They are planning for the next 50 years, kind of. They are looking at how do we help Africa? How do we help the developing world? How do we contribute to the infrastructure? How do we contribute to the education of the people? How do we impact the economic life? How do we impact their financial life? These are kind of projection that we have to do, and we can do that. And then we can also learn from the competition that how they handle their own challenges in some of the parts of the world, in Europe, in Jamaica, how they're able to solve those problems using sustainable means to create a new town development. These are kind of things that you can learn from. The next slide explains that, Jamaican example that will tap into the countryside, and instead of struggling with slum issues alone, they kind of move out into the suburb and to create a new town development that they can move the people to. As their income increase, as their living condition increase, they can as well move out into other developments. Conclusion: common memories in the developing world are locked in traditional urban spaces and how they are impacted by the continuous transformation brought about by the pandemics. For instance, when you have the pandemics, people are locked in, people don't know what to do, so we have to think about this slum area. If there's any pandemic again, if there's any problem with our, infrastructure, and we don't really attend to them, the SBS, sick building syndrome, can overblow into our face and become something that we don't actually plan for. So to prevent that, we have to provide quality infrastructure. We have to attend to the basic health condition. We have to provide clean water to contain, outbreak of diseases, outbreak of pandemics, and to ensure that they are not, we don't make room for those. Even when they are occurred, they are typically stamped out, eradicated, or contained based on a proper planning of the environment, proper sanitation, proper street management, neighborhood development, infrastructural provision, social amenities being put in place. So that is very, very important. So planning of the street environment must carry the seed of social justice. So the people in the slum, in the peripheral area, in the fringes, must not be abandoned to ensure equity, to ensure social justice. The elite, the politician, the educated must think about the other side of the town that is less fortunate, and how we can best bring them on board and make them feel alive as human beings. And in doing that, we ensure the total health of the city and well-being of the population that is constantly increasing in our own part of the world. I hope I've been able to bring some things to our attention and some of the ways we have been trying to solve them in our own part of the world and the condition we have find ourselves now, and hopefully we can get out of the condition as time goes on. That is the hope. Thank you very much. I hope that you can get any one or two things from this discussion. And if you have any question, you can always ask me. My contact address will be provided. My email address is dr.odeyale@gmail.com, and then you can always send some questions to me